Wragg, we're told, has given up the role voluntarily. The senior Tory has told Sky News tonight that Rishi Sunak is so weak, Mr Wragg had to fire himself. Should the Prime Minister have acted sooner? We'll ask that question to the Conservative Party chair, Richard Holden. Also tonight, the Home Secretary says he's taking all steps to keep fans safe after a media outlet linked to Islamic State reported that the group wants to attack Arsenal against Bayern Munich in London, and we're live there. We've been speaking to the Shadow Chancellor, Rachel Reeves, as she announces new proposals to pay for Labour's spending plans by going after tax dodgers. Foreign Secretary David Cameron is back in Washington to call for more US funding for Ukraine. Last time, a congresswoman said he should kiss her ass. This time, he says he hasn't come to lecture anybody. And as Simon Harris becomes Ireland's youngest Prime Minister, he's just 37, another youthful achiever enters the world stage. So how does he compare to fellow world leaders? We've got a quiz for you. Youthful, energetic, high-achieving, undoubtedly. Ayesha Hazarika and Guto Harri will be with me for the next hour. It's Tuesday, I'm Adam Parsons, live from Westminster, and this is the Politics Hub. A very good evening to you. We're going to start the Politics Hub with breaking news tonight. William Wragg has voluntarily given up the Conservative Party whip after he admitted giving his colleagues phone numbers to a suspected scammer. Our political correspondent, Gurpreet Narwan, is with me now. What's going on?
Yeah, so this is, for a bit of context, William Wragg, he's a senior Tory MP who admitted his involvement in a honey trap sexting scandal in which he handed over the personal phone numbers of some of his colleagues to a man he had met on the gay dating app Grindr. And he said he sent those images, he sent those phone numbers over because the man had compromising, or the individual had compromising images of him. So he had to hand them over. It's believed he was part of a spear phishing attack. And once that emerged, he apologised, said he was mortified, and subsequently announced that he would be stepping down as vice chairman of the Conservatives' 1922 backbench committee of backbench MPs. But he kept the whip, and it was said at the time that that was because he too was a victim of what had happened. But privately, many Tory MPs were questioning that decision. While some were sympathetic to his plight, others were less kind, including Andrea Jenkins, the MP who brandished him an idiot for compromising MP's security. She was involved in that, one of the numbers that were handed over. But William Wragg now has said off his own back that he will voluntarily relinquish the whip. He will stand as an independent MP. There is a police investigation going on, but following that, it is possible that the Common Standard Committee could open its own investigation into everything that's gone on. But it's also exposed the sort of broader fears and questions about security within Westminster. So Lindsay Hoyle, the Commons Speaker, has issued new guidance, a reminder of MPs on how to stay safe on their phones, and is urging anyone who has any information to come forward.
Gurpreet, thank you very much indeed. That's Gurpreet Narwan, our correspondent. Joining now by Richard Holden. Richard, quite a night for you to come and join us. Was William Wragg right to give up the Conservative whip?
Yes, I think so. He's already issued a fulsome apology. He's resigned from the 1922 Committee Executive. He's resigned from his role as chair of PACAC, which is an important committee in Parliament, and he's also given up the Conservative whip. And I think we already knew he wouldn't be standing at the next election. He's already announced he's standing down. So, yes, I think that's the right thing to have done.
Would you have wanted the party to take away the whip if he had not jumped first?
Look, I think he's made his apology. He's given up the whip. He's given up all of the important roles he's been involved in across Parliament. There's obviously an ongoing investigation now within Parliament, but also by the police, and I don't think it would be really appropriate for me to comment further while that's ongoing.
Except tonight, one of your senior MPs has, minutes after this happened, contacted Sky News and told us that Rishi Sunak is so weak that William Wragg has had to sack himself. I mean, this is a potential dividing point for your MPs about whether or not the party would have taken action against this man or just left him to his own devices?
Look, I think it's pretty clear what's happened here. As I said, there's an ongoing police investigation. There's an ongoing parliamentary investigation. And William Wragg's made his decision, and I think that's the right thing.
OK, when you say it's cleared, was he pushed or did he jump?
He's made his decision.
Well, yeah, but sometimes people make decisions because they're told to make them.
He's made his decision. There's an ongoing police investigation. You know, I have no idea the personal stresses which Mr Wragg is under as well. He's also apologised for what he's done. I think, you know, it's quite clear his career in public life is at an end. I think I just want to leave it there.
And how worried are you about this sting operation, about how far the tentacles of it could spread?
Well, that's a much bigger question, and one which I know no more than you do about that. With obviously an ongoing police investigation, I think it's you know, they will come to, I'm sure, come to the you know, find out all the facts about it, as will the parliamentary inquiry. That's what we need to see, because it's an it's an important issue when politicians or anybody in senior levels of public life is exposed in this way. And I think it's important that now you know, we allow those investigations to continue and we learn any lessons which are possible in the future.
We had expected tonight to be talking to you following on from Labour's announcement about some of their fiscal plans, going after tax dodgers, hoping to raise billions of pounds. Are you going to steal some of their ideas this time? Well,
look, what's happened over the last, since we came into government is we've seen a real reduction in that tax gap, is what we're talking about. Under the last Labour government, it was around 7.5%. That's now down to well under 5%. We've put in 200 measures to tighten up regulations over the last few years, particularly in recent budgets as well. If anything, Labour are sort of coming to this a little late. And obviously, on top of that, we've already announced changes which are being consulted on at the moment to around non-dom status, which we're going to abolish that status over the next couple of years as well. I think those are important moves in the right direction for the country, and you know, it's vitally important that everybody pays their fair share. That's what we're making sure happens. I think there are still, you know, some questions for Labour to answer at the moment regarding their own deputy leader in that regard. I think it's quite, you know, it's that big unanswerable which is still sat there at the moment, given all of the investigative work that's been done by various news outlets at the moment regarding Angela Rayner. You know, and also the questions there really for Sir Keir Starmer about, given everything that we now know, everything that Ms Rayner put in the public domain over the last few years, exactly what the situation is, why she's not now prepared to put that advice in the public domain, why Sir Keir Starmer's never asked to see it, especially when it relates to tax affairs. And, you know, and it's, you know, Angela Rayner is always the first to call for politicians to be held to a higher standard when it comes to politicians from other parties. And I think it'd be very wise of her to, you know, abide by that when it comes to her own conduct. Are
you happy that this information came in a book funded by Lord Ashcroft, who was a non-dom who saved about a 9-figure sum in tax?
Look, what I would say is that anybody should pay their legal taxes. And I think when you're running for public office, particularly for high public office, as Ms Rayner is, as Sir Keir Starmer is, he wants to be the Prime Minister of our country, yet he won't even ask his own deputy leader about her tax affairs when there's been clear public interest in knowing exactly what's gone on, and major questions have been raised. I think that's what's at the core of this, and it does seem to me that that's, you know, if you're not prepared to ask those questions, when you would do the same of the other side, I think you can't have it both ways. And I think Sir Keir's got some big questions to then answer around what he's going to do about this entire situation. I
just wondered, some of the tone of the comments made by yourself and others talks about if Sir Keir Starmer becomes Prime Minister, if Angela Rayner becomes Deputy Prime Minister. It almost sounds like you're laying the ground for losing the next election. No, defensive mode.
No, not at all. I mean, what we're saying is that this is the office we're going to be facing a general election, you know, in a few months' time, talking about.
A few months' time?
Well, that's right, because it's it's got to happen by the end of January.
A few suggest nearer than January.
January next year. And what I would say is, when you're doing that and when you're prepared to go on the offence, as Ms Rayner is regularly, or Sir Keir Starmer is, then I think you've got to also be prepared to be open to scrutiny. And I think the truth is, I've read some of the newspaper pieces. I actually, I've always thought that Andrew Rayner's a good politician. Somebody who's got, come from a tough background, in the north of England, a northerner like myself, who's gone out there, but she's got to be held to the same standards as everybody else. She can't hide behind that, as when it comes to her own tax affairs and when it comes to public money, and it's quite clear that that's what she's trying to do at the moment.
How irritable is Rishi Sunak at the moment? You know him well.
I do, yes. Yeah, well, we had a lovely meeting last week. I wouldn't say he was irritable at all. Look, the Prime Minister's getting on with the job. He's got a clear plan for the country. He's absolutely committed to hammering down on inflation. We've got that, it's down by 2/3 now. We need to get it to that 2% target. It's only through that prism that we'll be able to see mortgage rates start to fall as well.
When you look at the polls, you're getting absolutely hammered in the polls at the moment.
Well, we've got elections coming up in a few weeks' time.
Well, that's not good.
Right across the country. Well, let's see what happens. I'm out there campaigning. I've been out to the East and West Midlands yesterday. I was out in Scotland on Friday and Saturday. I've been out right across. I'm out in London later this week, and again back in the East and West Midlands. I'm out right across the country, and I tend to find on the doorsteps that there's a lot of people still to make up their minds, particularly when it comes to the general election. I think there's a long way to go yet. There's a lot that can happen in an election campaign, and also a lot can happen in the preceding months before that election campaign kicks off. But look, that's not to say that I don't see that the party's not in a walk in the park position. You've got Labour talking as if they're already measuring the curtains. I think they've already taken it for granted. What I'd say is that I'm not taking anything for granted. I'm not writing anything off. My job is to get out there and campaign, and also just to hold the opposition to account when they're putting stuff forwards as well.
I want to ask you on one very serious topic tonight, Richard Holden. We have football matches which have clearly been identified as targets in a media group linked to Islamic State. How worried are you that Islamic State is back in the headlines?
Look, I was a special advisor in the Ministry of Defence, actually, when Islamic State were at Mosul. And there was a massive ground operation there. The first time we saw drones being used really extensively as weapons of war. Anything to do with Islamic State is obviously deeply concerning for us, deeply concerning for the country as well. And I'm sure that the security services will be all over this. It's so important that they are, because they do a lot, and a lot often which we don't hear about, to protect and defend our country, as do some of our forces as well.
Richard Holden, we're very grateful for your time tonight. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you very much.
Let's have a look now at the breaking news that has just come into us, which is that William Wragg has voluntarily given up the Tory whip on the back of that much-discussssed scandal involving him sharing telephone numbers with colleagues following... given to a suspected scammer. He'd already resigned from 2 top Commons roles, including the vice chairman of the 1922 committee. He will not be standing in the next general election. He'd already announced that, but he will now be sitting as an independent. That story very clearly is going to feature in tomorrow's paper. It's going to have our extended press preview and news review from 10:30 this evening. Tonight's news, tomorrow's headlines. Joining us on that will be the journalist and broadcaster Jenny Kleeman, PR consultant and Conservative candidate in the upcoming general election, Alex Dean. However, an even more dynamic duo for us tonight, the broadcaster and former Labour advisor, Ayesha Hazarika, and Guto, Harri, the former Downing Street communications director. Ayesha Hazarika. What did you make of that? been a busy evening, hasn't it?
Certainly has been a busy evening. I mean, I wasn't hugely surprised by the news about William Wragg because it has felt like the pressure has been ratcheting up on him. Now, there is a line out there saying, you know, should the Conservative Party have actually removed the whip from him? But I think there was so much pressure on him. He had resigned his position as Vice Chair of the 1922 committee. And even over the weekend, I spoke to a number of MPs. And look, many people have got sympathy for the idea of anybody getting caught up in this kind of thing. However, the majority of people that I spoke to, MPs from across the House, who were trying to be empathetic, still thought that he had kind of behaved in a way which was just really deeply, deeply naive.
So what do you think? I mean, you obviously advised Boris Johnson. You're no stranger
I've got
to
the scars on my
element
back
of
from a similar incident that I don't want to relive. But, you know, he wasn't a million miles off from being a victim of crime, but he managed to sort of mess it up. So, you know, I wouldn't share your number without checking with you that you were happy for me to share it with someone. It's just basic etiquette, it's basic good manners. And actually, it sounded a bit more sinister than that, but that's kind of gone. I suspect tonight he was handed what we used to call the sort of glass of brandy and the revolver and told, you know what's expected of you, dear boy. And he did. What I would say in a situation like this, the bloodlust, the bloodthirstiness of the press and some of your colleagues, not to mention the opposition, can be not conducive to the due process that I think is important for all of us. And so when people say a leader, whether it's, you know, Keir or whether it's Rishi or whether it's Boris, is slow to act, what they're trying to do on the other side invariably is to say, on what basis would I ask this person to leave? We'll probably get on to Angela Rayner. On what basis would I just say, because there's a stir, because there's lots of noise, this person's got to go? So you've got to have some sort of due process. And when somebody then resigns of their own accord, it makes it a lot easier than trying to prove that you've done what you need to do for an execution. I'm going to just talk about a bloodlust there, but was it to ever thus?
I think it was. I think Guto's been a bit naive about the reality of Westminster. Westminster is a really tough place. Politics, particularly in this era, we're in the very, very fraught election year. It's a blood sport. And
well, on that basis, Angela Rayner should have gone ages ago. But I'm prepared to say that I need to know that there's a basis on which somebody goes.
I think to sort of suddenly just throw Angela Rayner in there is missing the point. He has admitted himself that he was very, very naive and very stupid. And I spoke to a cybercrime security on my show over the weekend because I was sort of saying, look, does this make you feel anxious in terms of foreign actors, you know, trying to sort of blackmail MPs? And he actually made a really good point. He said, in this particular case, it isn't technically a cyber security thing. This is a tale as old as the hills. This is a kind of classic case of sexual entrapment, which has happened in many, many forms, time immemorial around power and politics. It normally, the traditional story would be a kind of younger woman, maybe with an older man, but of course this is a younger man who has targeted. So I think
it's compromat.
Exactly.
I mean,
it's the old-fashioned compromat, which is something that anyone who enters politics... I remember when I first got my job at Downing Street, and you probably had the same thing. You get a big lecture from the security team there making clear that you're now vulnerable for all of these kinds of things, and you have to be sensible.
Which is, Guto, is pretty different. I mean, Angela Rayner has not admitted any wrongdoing.
No, I was talking about the need for due process. So, you know, we can get on to that. So I'm not comparing the two, but I do think this idea that a leader is weak because the leader demands the space to establish the facts, that's the point I'm making. I think that's important. And it's not conducive to have this atmosphere where whenever there's a whiff about you and one person raises a finger and points at you or whatever, or there's something that's a little bit sort of embarrassing but not necessarily legal nor indeed that shameful, that somebody's got to just go. And I think on this occasion the right thing has happened.
Well, hang on a minute, this was not done because of this difficult picture. This was done because he leaked MPs' numbers, and that is actually is a security breach. It's a security breach, and it's not the right thing to do. And in terms of due process, of course there must be due process. Yeah. But unfortunately, under your previous boss, one of the people who did more to make people lose trust in due process was Boris Johnson. There was a huge number of cases. Owen Paterson, that ended up being an absolute disaster. Chris Pincher, that ended up being an absolute disaster.
Because even the way Boris wanted him to fire him without establishing the facts.
But that's because
and there was a trigger with that where Boris decided, with some of us in the room, that the moment there was a complaint to the police or to the parliamentary authorities, then he would ask Chris Pincher to leave. We waited for that moment. He acted within seconds of that moment coming. I think that's a good way of approaching things, rather than just thinking...
well, many of your colleagues disagree,
yes.
and Owen Paterson was an absolute shambles because one position was taken, then another position was taken.
And at that point, we're going to take a breath on this one. Ayesha, Guto, we'll be back with you in just a little bit. So what is going to define the next election? Well, according to the most recent polling, it isn't small votes, nor is it the wars in either Gaza or Ukraine. What we worry about most are two very familiar issues, the economy and the NHS. And maybe that gives us a key to understanding why Labour's comments about the economy are variously worthy, OK, a bit vague, just sometimes a bit pretty muted. Today, we did get plans to make money from cracking down on tax avoidance, albeit I suspect we all think we've heard that from a lot of parties over the course of a lot of years. But the truth is that when a football team is 3-0 up, they don't really need to take risks anymore. And if the polls are right, that is where Labour find themselves comfortably in front, fearful only, surely, of making horrible mistakes. So, is the party's plan now just to keep its head down and try to convince voters that this time a Labour government won't spend all the money? Or is there a secret, radical economic plan that's being kept under wraps? That is something that we're going to explore more over the course of tonight's programme. But to explore some of those themes of Labour's tax spending is Tamara Cohen.
Just give me 10 minutes and I'll be back with you.
With resources under strain, how to fix the challenges in the NHS will be a key election issue.
Right, let me introduce you. This is
Labour's Rachel Reeves today setting out how they would find £2 billion a year to help pay for more scans, staff and appointments by cracking down on tax avoiders.
You said the NHS is on its knees, years of underfunding, chronic problems. You know, you're not promising to kind of wipe out waiting lists. Is there going to be more coming if there is a Labour government?
The £2 billion to fund the reduction in NHS waiting lists, 2 million additional appointments a year to clear that backlog, 7.4 million on NHS waiting lists. Also 700,000 emergency dental appointments and also breakfast clubs in all primary schools. I don't think that is a drop in the ocean.
But experts say increasing the tax take is always uncertain.
No, I'm confident about our numbers for a couple of reasons. This has been tried before in the UK and it has brought in additional revenue to invest in frontline public services. And I've announced today a panel of experts led by Sir Edward Troop, the former permanent secretary at HMRC, to advise me on how we can bring in this additional money.
And what about her colleague Angela Rayner?
Do you think that she's dodged any tax?
No, and Angela Rayner has taken tax advice. And
Have you seen that advice?
No, because I haven't seen the tax returns or the tax or legal advice of any of my colleagues, and I won't treat Angela Rayner different.
To pay for their plans to support the NHS, Labour say they'll bring in £5 billion a year by the end of the Parliament by bringing in more tax people owe, closing the gap. That includes £500 million they'll need to spend on HMRC to hire more people and more technology. They also say they'll bring in more than £2 billion by closing loopholes they say the government have left for non-DOMs. But there are big questions about how far it will all go.
If the Labour government wanted to not cut all departments, it would need to find 20 billion or so. If it wanted to not cut investment, it needs to find another 20 billion or so. So 5 billion is not to be scoffed at, but in the bigger picture, it's relatively small compared to the very big public finance challenges.
Rachel Reeves has said Britain is at a crossroads, facing multiple crises. The tough spending decisions the next government will face will only come under more scrutiny. Tamara Cohen, Sky News, Manchester.
That was Tamara Cohen, and you are watching the Politics Hub here on Sky News. And coming up, our duo will react to that Rachel Reeves announcement. And we'll be speaking to the Shadow Work and Pensions Minister, Alison McGovern, as one of Britain's largest unions denies claims of sexism in the workplace. Lord Cameron holds talks with Antony Blinken after meeting up with Donald Trump as he tries to secure more American funding for Ukraine. And as Simon Harris becomes Ireland's youngest ever Prime Minister, we'll take a look at whether there really is a perfect age to become a leader.
I don't write songs to be famous. I write songs because I've got to make something good out of something bad.
I liked this film. I think there's been a lot of misinformation about it online. A lot of people thought it was going to be disrespectful to her and kind of dwell on the drugs. But actually, it's quite a positive, lovely first-person story. In a way, it's told from her point of view. The director wanted to show things from her perspective when she met Blake, when she fell for this man who would be very difficult for her. They had a terrible, tumultuous relationship, as we know. But here, played by Marisa Abela and Jack O'Connell, it's a rather touching story about romantic obsession, and then an obsession which then, of course, led to the writing of one of the best-selling albums of all time, Back to Black.
There's one thing like learning the mannerisms and learning what it is that she does with her body, but there's another thing like inhabiting those to the point where it feels completely natural. So like if someone says something that I don't like I move in a certain way that she would move, and if I'm super excited about something, then I'm excited in the way that she would express that, you know, because there's one thing about being present in a moment as an actor, and then there's another about being present in the moment as an actor and also layering things on top. So it was just doing enough work in the preparation process that I wasn't thinking about these things on set, that I could just, you know, be with the other people and enjoy it.
I think at first, obviously, it takes some adjustment because nobody can be Amy Winehouse. Obviously, she does a very good job singing, but nobody can sing exactly like Amy Winehouse. But she approximates it well enough. And after a while, I think because of the strong filmmaking, you relax into it and you kind of believe it. And I enjoyed it.
Welcome back. Well, we have just been hearing about Labour's plans to go after tax dodgers. Let's bring on our duo for tonight, the broadcaster and former Labour advisor, Baroness Hazarika, and Guto Harri, former Downing Street Communications Director. Ayesha, right, let's imagine that you're back advising the Labour Party. Would you have asked them to be a little bit more dynamic than this? Or do you feel that the happy going steady?
Well, I think your football analogy, somebody who knows very little about football, I feel like your football analogy is very good. Look, I think at the moment, everybody looks at the polls and I think a lot of people think, it's in the bag. It's absolutely not in the bag for Labour at all. Let's not forget, if you look back at the history of political history in this country, the Conservative Party is very good at acquiring and maintaining power, and the Labour Party is really good at losing elections, even when it's ahead in the polls. If you look at history, in the last 100 years, the Labour Party's only had 6 Prime Ministers. We've had 5 Tory Prime Ministers since 2010. So that just gives you a sense of the challenge. And so I think the Labour Party is in an enviable position because they are doing well in the polls. But there is also that, great analogy about Labour in opposition is like carrying that Ming vase over a highly polished floor. The Labour Party is going to feel very nervous about the fact that people think, it's all in the bag. But there's lots of really difficult questions. And they are I know Rachel very well. She and Keir Starmer and the rest of the team are very seized of the fact that it's not just getting over the line, it's what they do. And they know that they're going to not be in a 1996, 1997 situation where they're going to come in and inherit a good wind in terms of the economy. Things are going to be really, really difficult. So they can't go in and make promises they can't keep. That would be utter madness. But I think the announcement today has got a lot of merit. It was difficult because the Conservatives kind of shot their fox with that non-Dob announcement. However, there were big loopholes, and that has given Rachel Reeves an advantage to go in and say, right, this is how we're going to pay for these things.
Guto, what did you think, bold or bland?
I think bland, but suitably bland for somebody in her role. I think Keir Starmer's got to step up. He's not remotely where Tony Blair was in terms of creating a buzz and an excitement and an expectation, but she's going to be holding the purse strings. And I think we all look at somebody who's going to hold the purse strings, and if she looks serious, which she does, and if she looks like she understands what she's talking about, which she does, and if the changes she announces are quite modest, we feel somehow reassured by that. So she's carrying out her part of the partnership, I think, very well. But the other part of the partnership, the leadership, is lacking that sort of, that dynamism, that excitement. That's, after all these years when you think the Conservatives have let down the country, is this as good as it gets? Is this as exciting as it gets? Is this as different as it gets? I don't think anyone, even Keir Starmer's greatest fans, are enthused.
Right, but more from both of you in just a minute. But actually, you were talking about the number of sort of Conservative Prime Ministers we've had. Let's talk about one of those predecessors, the Foreign Secretary, Lord Cameron, who's now in Washington after holding talks with the US Secretary of State, Antony Blinken, as well as the Republican presidential hopeful Donald Trump. Well, David Cameron met with Trump in a surprise visit to Mar-a-Lago, his sprawling estate, despite previously calling him divisive, stupid and wrong. Cameron is in America in part to secure more US funding for Ukraine in their war against Russia. Well, let's cross to our US correspondent, James Matthews, who's in Washington. And James, how successful a visit do you gauge this has been for David Cameron?
Well, I wonder when you look at the cast list, actually, of this visit, Adam. Donald Trump, no friend, certainly in the past, to David Cameron. And today, you look at the people he's meeting, and I wonder about the influence that they have. The people who are meeting him face-to-face and those who have neglected to do so, namely Speaker Mike Johnson. We're in the echoey hallways of the Capitol building, Adam. You can see behind me the tourists hard at it in the area underneath the rotunda. Lord Cameron is somewhere else, Britain's Foreign Secretary, meeting Republican members of Congress, certainly. He said during that news conference that he would meet anybody who wanted to meet him. In the spirit, I suppose, of Churchill. We've got a bit of stage dressing for you, Adam. There you go. There is Winston Churchill, defender of freedom, they call him here, honorary US citizen. And there's a Churchill quote, in days to come, the British and American peoples will, for their own safety and for the good of all, walk together in majesty, in justice and in peace. It may be the theme as written by Cameron himself for this visit, particularly with his talks with the former President Trump last night. They were talking a number of subjects. Cameron was quite circumspect about it, but the Trump camp, they say they spoke about Brexit, UK and US elections, spoke about their mutual admiration for the late Queen Elizabeth II, no less, but also Ukraine was very much on the agenda, the very serious subject matter, because Donald Trump is a block on the $60 billion of Ukraine funding. He doesn't like the package as it stands, and that money is gridlocked in this building. Now, Cameron's dynamic with Trump, one wonders how it stands today. It was no good previously. As you said, Cameron, from a safe distance, has insulted him as protectionist, misogynistic, stupid and wrong, divisive. We're told it was a warm meeting last night, but the trouble is, Donald Trump has considerable influence over Republicans in this building, right-wing Republicans who are standing in the way of that Ukraine funding. Mike Johnson, the Speaker, is one of them, and one wonders whether or not the fact that he's saying he doesn't have time to meet Cameron is a mark of Trump's influence and his reluctance to be seen in the company of David Cameron, because it all gets very complicated. But Marjorie Taylor Greene, she's trying to oust Speaker Mike Johnson from his job should he try to push Ukraine funding through. So you can see why Johnson wants to keep a distance from a British Foreign Secretary who's no pals with Trump, hasn't been in the past, and doesn't sit with Ukraine policy as Trump would have it. So a constructive trip to Washington, D.C., that's what David Cameron would hope for, but one wonders about the degree of positivity, certainly in terms of positive results, Ukraine-wise, that may stem from it.
James, thank you very much. James Matthews there with politics, history and a bit of architecture, all on the rotunda. Guto, really interesting. It was the Lord Cameron sort of bestriding the global stage. Is this a little bit of an awkward comparison for Rishi Sunak?
I think if it delivers results, it's a great thing. It offers hope of life after death. It is, for Donald Trump, sign that you can be, down and out of office, but there's a way back. I'd have loved to have been a fly on the wall, because one of them is an uncouth, horrendous, excuse of a statesman, Donald Trump.
I'm glad we clarified that.
And the other one has the self-confidence that only a sort of old Etonian education and an Oxbridge kind of first, and not to mention being Prime Minister.
Hold on, Guto, let's just be clear.
So what
you don't need to have to go to Eton or Oxbridge.
No, the self-confidence. Some would call it arrogance, cockiness, whatever. I was being polite. So what you have are two men with immense self-belief who kind of could clash amazingly. In seriousness, the object of the exercise is unlocking 60 billion, without which the war in Ukraine is going in the wrong direction for most of us, and going in that direction south fast. And sadly, whatever is written about this visit and whoever he sees and whatever the chemistry, I can't see this visit unlocking that. And in that sense, even the sort of charms and the skills and the experience that David Cameron has is landing largely, I suspect, on deaf ears.
And a quick thought about if Labour get into power, even the awkward things that Lord Cameron has said are overshadowed. There's some extraordinary caustic comments that have been made by Labour politicians. It's been a very hard relationship.
Well, let's cross that bridge.
If Donald Trump were to win the election.
There's many bridges to cross before we get to that point. Well, it's not written in the stars that Donald Trump is going to win. It's still quite a tight race. But I think what's really fascinating about David Cameron is I sort of agree partly with what Guto said, which is he is proving that there is life after, humiliation. David Cameron, many people look back at him and think, oh, actually, he was quite a moderate Prime Minister given what came afterwards. But, his career did end in failure. It ended in Brexit. A lot of people are very angry about the austerity. His post-prime ministerial career had a lot of scandal around lobbying and the Greensill. So it feels like this is his opportunity to almost rehabilitate himself in this role. He knows he's only going to be doing it for another couple of months until the election. So many people do actually think he's putting in quite a shift. He's going around the world. I interviewed Jack Straw at the weekend, former Labour Foreign Secretary, who conceded through gritted teeth that he thought David Cameron was doing quite a good job. But here is the thing. When it comes down to it, as Guto said, he is not really going to be able to move the needle. He is no way going to persuade Donald Trump to change his mind on Ukraine. And when it comes to Gaza, having those meetings with Anthony Blinken and others, Britain, I'm afraid, is not a big player on the world stage anymore. Benjamin Netanyahu is not listening to what David Cameron says. He probably doesn't even know who Rishi Sunak really is. The only person that matters is Joe Biden for Benjamin Netanyahu.
Both. For the moment, thank you. We're going to be back to you later on, not least for a quiz. Coming up next on the Politics Hub, one of Britain's largest unions denies claims of sexism in the workplace. We've got a special report on that. And as Simon Harris becomes Ireland's youngest ever Prime Minister, let's take a look at whether there really is a perfect age to become a leader. Welcome back. Well, the staff at the GMB, one of the UK's biggest trade unions, have told Sky News that sexism is rife in their workplace. That comes 4 years after a report that sent shockwaves through the union, branding it institutionally sexist. Sky's political correspondent, Sarina Barker-Singh, has got more.
If our union does not stand for decency and equality, then we stand for nothing.
A defining moment for GMB. Their General Secretary Gary Smith pledging to end sexism and bullying after an independent report in 2020 called it institutionally sexist, that misogyny and sexual harassment were endemic.
It's to do with the hierarchies and the structures, the very old structures.
Women are terrified to report the discrimination that they're facing because they're being attacked by their own unions.
Doubts now over whether the union has truly changed, as now the GMB's own members have threatened to strike, citing concerns around serious allegations of bullying and harassment. Action is currently suspended, but talks are ongoing. GMB categorically denies claims of a culture of bullying or sexism within the union and say they've established new structures and policies since that report.
It started to feel like I had suffered abuse, and then I was being re-abused by the organisation that was supposed to protect me.
Eleanor, not her real name, is one of the women who claims misogyny is still rife in GMB. She said she felt bullied into dropping a sexual harassment complaint in 2022. Instead, the union asked her to sign a non-disclosure agreement. GMB say they do not use NDAs, but standard settlement agreements.
Where's the empathy, where's the equality in how they've dealt with my case or other women's cases? But calling it out has a really heavy toll.
She was later dismissed after being accused of sexual harassment herself. She thinks she wasn't given a fair process because she spoke out.
What's your motivation for speaking out today?
If the organisation has such deep-rooted misogyny that this is how I'm treated, what chance has somebody got if they're a cleaner in a remote office in GMB? Absolutely none.
This was meant to be a turning point for the union, a real chance to change things from the inside. But women I've spoken to inside GMB Union say that sexism, they think, is still rife, and the report hasn't been implemented in the way they would like to see. One told me it's still toxic. There's a dysfunctional culture. Another said, how can we fight injustice if we are facing it ourselves? GMB say Eleanor's account that she was pressured out of raising a complaint is untrue and say her dismissal for sexual harassment, bullying, 2 counts of gross misconduct was unanimously agreed by a disciplinary panel chaired by an independent judge. They are now reviewing her case again to investigate whether fair and transparent procedures were properly followed. Sarina Barker-Singh, Sky News.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Shadow Work and Pensions Secretary, Alison McGovern. Thank you very much indeed for your time. First of all, our report into the GMB Union, a year after it was branded institutionally sexist. Are you as shocked as we are about what we've heard?
Well, these are serious matters. You know, everybody should be able to be a part of a trade union and feel safe whilst doing so. And I obviously can't comment on the detail of it, and there's, you know, an investigation there going on, but I, like everybody, would want to know that those recommendations that were made have been carried out, and I would refer you to what the GMB have said themselves on that. It's really important that everybody feels safe.
Are you comfortable with the Labour Party continuing to take money from the GMB?
Well, trade union donations are some of the most regulated donations in the whole of politics, so I think that there's a lot of regulation over trade unions, which makes it much better. And actually, the GMB have got to tackle these issues. And as I said, I would refer you to what they've said themselves.
Let's look at your fiscal plan. You started laying it out today, but some people are saying you need to be more ambitious. What do you think of that? Does Labour need to aim a little further for the stars?
Well, I think given the economy at the moment, where we've got a huge number of people out of the workforce because they're unwell, given that growth has been pretty much flat for really quite a long time now, I think it is ambitious to want to help our NHS serve people better. I think it is ambitious to want to help parents have a breakfast club at primary school so that they can get to work on time. We need stability and security in our economy. We need predictability, crucially, so that businesses can it can invest. I think, no, that is ambitious. We know that we are...
But you're going to need more money. I mean, these are all laudable ambitions. The question is, where are you going to get the money to fulfil them?
Well, as Rachel Reeves has set out today, you know, along with shutting the loopholes that Jeremy Hunt looks like he's still going to leave in the tax regime for non-DOMs, so there is still going to be work to do to close those loopholes. We're also going to take the National Audit Office's advice and invest in HMRC and get the right staff there to bring in resources that should be coming in that are currently not being collected. And if you get that investment into HMRC, NAO say that by the end of a parliament, that could be about £5 billion. And that's what we're going to do to bring the money in.
Which is great. But then, as you know, in the overall scheme of things, that's not a vast sum of money. Inflation will tick into that. Is there, even if you're not going to tell us about it, is there a more ambitious master plan that Labour are working on that they don't want to announce because they're worried that it'll get stolen?
So I think this is an ambitious plan, I'll be honest with you. If I think about my own health service that's really struggling at the moment, having 2 million extra more appointments, particularly on the diagnostic side, so investing in state-of-the-art scanners and other things so that we can get quicker and better diagnostics and get people treated more quickly, to me that is pretty ambitious because that will help people feel better more quickly and be able to do the kind of work that they want. Of course, it's not for me to say when the general election is going to be. So as soon as Rishi Sunak calls that general election, we'll be setting out our manifesto and there'll be more to say in that. But these plans, confirming that we can afford to have the investment we want in those breakfast clubs in primary schools and the extra appointments in our NHS, that is ambitious. It's about making our country work, making sure that strong public services support a strong economy.
But it's not visionary. Beyond those tactical moves, Alison, I put it to you, as I've said at the start of this programme, that you feel like you're 3-0 up. Your fear is that you're going to make a mistake. Is there a danger of complacency in your party?
There is absolutely no complacency in the Labour Party. And Labour Party activists up and down the country are working incredibly hard to speak to the public, listen to what they've got to say. And one of the things that people tell us is that they worry if they need an NHS appointment, and that's why this has been such a priority for us. And, you know, I look at the country and I think, well, actually, the numbers tell me that things are not going well. We've got, as I say, we've got this big problem with economic inactivity, which is just unemployment by another name. We've got to fix that. That will get our economy growing again. And I think that ambitious vision of having strong public services helping to build a strong economy is the one that we want. That will mean that as our economy grows, everyone does better, more money in people's pockets. That's what the Labour Party's for, to help people have a better quality of life.
How annoying is it for you that on a day when you want to talk about cracking down on people avoiding tax, you're also having to face so many questions about Angela Rayner, who, there are those say, did exactly the same thing?
Angela's answered question after question about this. And, you know, she's said what's happened, she's taken advice, she's done that, and I think she's answered all of those questions. And actually, to be honest with you, Angela Rayner is the Deputy Leader of the Labour Party. She does a great job. She brings a whole host of experience to politics, and, you know, I think she's doing a fantastic job. You know, part of our plans is to sort out the social care workforce, to get those better arrangements, get a good deal for social care staff, and Angela brings that experience.
That it's fair enough that we scrutinise somebody who could be Deputy Prime Minister of the country. It just feels like, why doesn't she just, if she's had tax advice, it's a fairly vanilla thing, why doesn't she just hand it over and kill this issue?
Well, she's answered so many questions on this, and I think it's right that if, you know, there's issues that apply, that, you know, cover other people's personal lives, they shouldn't have to have their personal information put in the public domain. That's not fair.
But you want the government to publish the legal advice about Israel. I mean,
yeah,
why is some of it going
there's
in
a
the public
There's a parliamentary process that needs to happen with regards how export licences are agreed. That's a completely, it's a completely separate issue.
But is it? Because it's about political probity.
Yeah, but Angela's answered question after question on this. And as I said, she's doing a cracking job as our deputy leader, and she is bringing forward great policies that will really help people in this country.
Alison McGovern, thank you very much. Coming up on the Politics Hub, after Simon Harris becomes Ireland's youngest ever leader, we're going to be asking, is there a perfect age to lead your country? And we have a quiz for you next, so don't go away.
Coming up on the UK Tonight at 8, heightened security at Arsenal's Champions League match tonight because of threats from Islamic State. We'll be live at the Emirates and we'll get the views of a stadium security expert who worked on London 2012 and the 2014 World Cup. And I'll be speaking to Dame Prue Leith about her campaign to change the law on assisted dying. That's the UK Tonight at 8.
And I'm Sky's US correspondent based here in Los Angeles.
It's turning everybody into, a crazy, violent drug addict.
How are you feeling? I am angry.
It is an anti-woman agenda.
2 women say that you paid for their abortions. Are you a hypocrite, sir? Will your candidates win?
I hope so. I think they will. I think they're great candidates.
I gotta be realistic. My sister's dead.
More than 4 weeks on, there's no murder weapon and no suspect. Are you going to catch this killer?
We are doing everything we can.
Ghislaine Maxwell has pleaded not guilty to all 6 charges against her. Mum, how are you feeling today?
Jeffrey said, you answer to Ghislaine, you just don't cross her.
We're so excited.
Severe nightmares of these people coming in and just taking me in the middle of the night.
I've watched as whole towns were torn apart by natural disaster.
I'm alive and I'm thankful for that, but there are a lot of people who aren't.
It's not the winds people fear most here, it's the water. We take you to the heart of the stories which shape our world. Do you truly believe what you're saying?
A lot of cases that I know are reported from Ukrainian missiles themselves.
Ambassador, with respect, I think that's preposterous.
I'm Greg Milam, and I'm Sky's Chief North of England correspondent. We aim to be the best and most trusted place for news.
Warm welcome back to the Politics Hub. It's often said that age is just a number. How much does it matter when you're actually leading your country? Today, Simon Harris became Ireland's youngest ever Prime Minister at the age of 37 after the shock resignation of Leo Varadkar last month. So we thought, given this new appointment, we would test our panellists tonight on their knowledge of world leaders, past and present, how old they were when they got the big job. Right, let's kick off with the first one. That's Simon Harris, you know he's 37. Right, Jacinda Ardern, New Zealand's Prime Minister 2017, and took the title of the world's youngest female head of government. How old do you think she was when she got the big job?
I think she's about 31.
OK.
About 35?
Point to go to 37. She was 37, so strong if she got to 31. Right, let's go to our second contender. You might recognise him, Vladimir Putin. Now, he feels like he's been in power for a lawfully long time, but how old? Because we're going to start with you this time.
So this is 20-odd years ago. He would have been for late 50s.
Late 50s. Ayesha? I feel like Bruce Forsyth. You're going higher or lower?
I'm going on mid-40s.
Mid-40s, great, yes. 47 when he took the big job. 1-1. Right, let's go into contender number 3. It's Rishi. Ayesha, we're going to start with you this time. How old was Rishi Sunak when he became Prime Minister?
40.
40?
41.
41. The answer is 42. So you're both near the ball, but Guto, I'm afraid you get the point. Right, number 4, slightly more upbeat. This is going into my Europe correspondent job. Sanna Marin, Prime Minister of Finland, notably young. Guto, this time we start with you.
34.
I think you're 32.
Annoyingly, spot on. 34. And finally, not so young. For those of us who are older than all of these answers so far, how long do you think? Joe Biden, how old was he when he got the job?
In his 80s.
Actually, I'm going to let you start because I'm not going to mention the...
Was he like 84?
80... What did you say, 80?
78.
I'm going to give you the point, all right? 3-2. The great fact we want to say is that when Joe Biden, when he was born, was nearer to Abraham Lincoln's presidency than to his own.
Wow.
Ayesha, Guto, thank you both very much indeed. That is the fact that you will remember from this programme. Right, that's it from us. I'll see you tomorrow at 7. Up next, it's the UK Tonight with Sarah Jane Mead.